Welcome back. You're listening to the Journey to Technology, Modernization, and Government, sponsored by Pega on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today, Harry Singh, the Chief Information Officer of the Bureau of Engraving and Printing at the Treasury Department, and Don Sherman, the Chief Technology Officer and Vice President of Product Marketing at Pega. Gentlemen, before break, we were talking about data and the importance of data, and I think, Harry, you brought this up just briefly, so let's go down that path of compliance and how understanding the data, knowing what rules and regulations you have to follow, automation can really help with that compliance piece. And imagine at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, because you both have IT systems, but you also have OT systems, those regulations, those compliance issues are maybe even deeper that you have to kind of follow. So are you starting to apply some automation, or what do you see as the potential for automation to meet those compliance challenges?
So a few years ago, we actually stood up a quality directorate. The focus there was compliance on the quality side. On the business side, obviously there is a requirement as it relates to compliance with our currency order. Specific spoilage thresholds, product quality overall. So us working in conjunction with our stakeholders, and as I mentioned with the data analytics community of practice, we've really brought the user community in so they can make sense of data, correlate data across our different production phases, SCADA, manufacturing, engineering, to make better sense of data, which results in streamlined data-driven decisions. So that not only results in reduction of production cost, better product quality. So that's on the business side. On the IT side, with our move and overall OMB's cloud strategy to stay in compliance there, we've migrated more to the cloud to reduce the overall data center footprint reduction. So, and as I mentioned earlier, with the modernization and establishing those proof of concepts and getting a user community engaged, so that results in reduction of delivery to the enterprise. So, so that's a quicker delivery compliance. But then with the cloud itself, the cyber requirements. Do we really have the servers we provision? We don't need to, right? Because with cloud, we can easily provision server. So that really streamlines the whole DevOps. So that, I think both IT modernization and automation has resulted in significant help with overall the compliance regulatory requirements.
So Harry, I just want to first thank you for teaching me a new term, because the next time I try to shove an old dollar bill into a Coke machine, I'm going to think about currency spoilage. But I think the other place that you get you can think about compliance in terms of automation is automation, and especially automation that works sort of end to end from a case management perspective, can really help ensure compliance. Right, so Pega, we work with the Treasury Department with TCIS, which is the check information system. So we basically process all the checks that come through the Treasury. And a lot of that is around when check exceptions happen, making sure that we're auditing every step of how that exception got fixed, so that we can go and play back and say, yep, we followed all the rules and we did it in the right time frames. We work with a lot of banks and around what's called KYC, which is the know your customer process they have to go through to prove back to the government that they are actually doing the right validations to make sure that money laundering is not happening. And when that's a manual process, it's really hard to validate compliance. When it's an automated process, when you've got case management guiding people through each of the individual steps, you're getting this automatic audit trail at the end of every case that says, here's who did it, here's when it happened, here are the systems that were used, so you can play back exactly how things worked. So I think automation actually can help drive better compliance, better documentation of compliance. And then I also think that there's a real ability in moving towards agile, as you were saying, to get to more compliant systems, right? I think part of that is, using DevOps actually means that you're testing stuff in a much more regular way. The big danger of waterfall is you get to an end of a multi-month project, then you go start testing it and you find everything that's broken. If you actually get a DevOps pipeline in place, you're testing every night. So you're finding problems before they happen. So when you do release code, you're releasing a smaller chunk and it's pretty fully tested so you can see your impact. Another place that is interesting to us is this use of what I would call model-driven or low-code application development, right? So we're rolling out with Census Bureau right now the system that's going to drive a lot of the intake of census data, both from the web, but also the little mobile app that census takers are going to walk around with. And we're building that entirely in a low-code environment. And Census found as they did their research that they could get to about 98% of all of their needs without writing a line of code. And here's why that's, I think, is important. One is it allows you to pull the business experts in, right? So that's, you get your stakeholder involvement directly, so you can really do that agile well. But the other thing is it means that your processes are self-documenting, right? Because the system of record for how I do this work is not a bunch of Java code that nobody can read. It's an actual diagram of the stages and steps of my business process. So I can click a button and say, you want to know how I work this? Here's how I work it. Here are the business rules. Here are the systems that get touched. And that ability to instantly document everything that you do, not only do you get results faster, but you get results that are compliant and documented.
Let me just jump in before Harry. When you talk about building 90% of their needs without writing a line of code, so they're reusing code? So how are they meeting their needs? Because
Yeah.
Go ahead, talk Don.
The whole paradigm that we're seeing is and this is kind of a form of automation, right? If I can get a business user to draw me out a business process or draw me out the stages of my case, right? The computer can actually, from that picture, automate the writing of the code. The computer can say, okay, this picture needs to have these code modules. I'm going to go automate generating it and actually running it for you. So now, instead of having to have somebody take the requirements that a business user might write and then manually type in the code that does it, I'm going directly from the business objective into the code automatically. So what that means is, when I design my business process, it's not just that I'm reusing code, although I may call services that already exist. I'm actually building my application completely visually. And that means I get much more stakeholder involvement from the business teams. That's how you actually get to the point that you can take somebody off the floor and say, hey, I'm going to train you on this visual tool because, Jason, as you were saying, people are more technology savvy. They're willing to learn it. So if I can say, look, I'm going to train you on how to drag and drop your business process into this, I can actually get somebody who knows the business actively building the application that's going to drive it.
Just on that, Don, it's really API library you may have, right? So there's, most of it's automated.
Yep.
But then as from a business process re-engineering, as you establish those workflows,
yes,
some you still may need to develop, right? And you continue to build your
and you need to
library.
connect up to the API, but a lot of the workflows that are sort of manually driven and involve like human screens, so I need to guide a user through these steps, or I need to have a business rules that need to run. I can do that visually. I can give the user a decision table that they put in the criteria. I can give them a screen where they mock up what they want the user experience to be. And so the place where I need the technology is the data plugin that we talked about earlier, to plug into the APIs as my data sources, to pull that into the process, to drive the rules and to drive the actual outcomes back into the legacy infrastructure.
And what kind of applications are you developing? Within the...
So we're running the gamut with this, right? U.S. Census is building the application that's going to run the 2020 U.S. Census, on this technology. The check information system that I mentioned, the Veterans Affairs has got a system that manages all of their contracts and payments out. You go larger than that, you look at somebody like JPMC, who runs most of their treasury operations on systems that were built this way. American Express runs its customer service desktop on a system that is built this way. So this low-code application development, it's not a vendor pipe dream. It's the way that businesses are starting to do a lot of this. And it by itself is not a silver bullet, but its ability to pull your stakeholders even deeper into the application development cycle and really make them a part of the Agile team is a game changer.
Let me just put a finer point on this. So somebody, the computer, if you will, or the robot is building the code.
Yes.
It's Harry or I don't have to sit behind and have Don tell me, okay, first I want point A to go to point B. Okay, write the code. Okay, now what?
Yeah.
So the user, as you said, is as they put the process in.
Yeah, what you've basically done is you've taken, usually business analysts would write a requirements document, you hand that off, that gets coded, a couple months later, you see what it is, oh, that's not what I wanted, then you go back and forth, right? This is, Well, I have my business analyst just draw my business process, hit a play button, and then say, oh, is that what I want, or is that not what I want?
And because we're talking about Agile here, that modernization happens so much more quickly because you see it happen maybe in front of you or maybe the next day. But
and this is this rapid prototyping, that Harry was speaking about earlier. It allows for this continuous playback. And a lot of what I think the modernization effort, especially in the government, needs to be about is not just about ripping and replacing out the legacy systems, but about building this agility layer that can sit on top of the legacy. And increasingly what we turn the legacy systems in is just to databases, big systems of record. And now I have my agility layer where I can build my automated processes that connect across, and where I enable my agencies to start testing and innovating and playing with new ways of driving these processes, new ways of engaging constituents, et cetera.
I think just to add on to that, Don, so there is the mission function, which your users are, and how do you automate and modernize that. Second is for the users who are part of an enterprise organization, how do you create something which defines their employee journey? Right, that's the second element. And the third one on our, from an IT infrastructure, we talked earlier about there are enough compliance and regulatory requirements, and then certain guidance around it that you have to comply with. So that train itself is going to continue to evolve overall. But onto your buzzword, you do like that low code?
I actually don't love the term low code because I feel like the real goal of it is actually no code at all. But we've been doing this kind of model driven or visually driven application design long before low code was a buzzword that kind of hit the market. And I really think it's fundamentally about changing the makeup of your Agile teams so that you have much tighter collaboration between business and IT, and you get to results that are meaningful for your stakeholders just a lot faster. That's really what this is about.
And it's also talking about, just another piece of this is the repeatable side.
Yeah.
If you've done something once, there's somebody else somewhere who's going to have that same challenge. Again, even if Bureau of Engraving and Printing, you guys deal with money, right? So what other agencies deal with money? Well, maybe the Mint, but they deal with coins and they're different. But does any other agency? No, but your case management of the process of manufacturing, for instance, or even just the business process. Harry, that's the other big benefit of this Agile DevOps approach.
I think overall, as we're discussing, the whole to the segment is really how do you leverage modernization automation for quicker delivery to be in compliant with regulatory requirements. So that's it's really an engagement not only on the IT side but also on the business side, to drive the change forward. And then enable the mission overall.
And it takes, look, again, the model-driven technology by itself, right? I've seen organizations where the IT department takes it on and just uses it as a faster development tool, and at the end of the day, things don't change much, right? You've got to have agreement for the business that they have to take a stake in what their applications do and are going to actively participate. You have to have agreement from IT that there's going to be a little bit of release of control over to the business of parts of the application landscape. And it's only when you have that kind of agreed upon shift in understanding of our roles and the accountability that you actually drive not just some incremental improvements, but you actually start transforming how some of these agencies work.
We're just about out of time. This has just been a great conversation. Don, let me just start with you. If there's one common mistake or one pothole that agencies should avoid as they go down this path of Agile, DevOps, and really understanding the business side, what would it be? What would you recommend they avoid?
Yeah, I think the mistake that a lot of organizations make, especially in modernization, is starting from a system perspective rather than a process or a journey perspective. Right? If I start from a system perspective, I inevitably lead to ripping in and out of big systems, right? Big high-risk projects, et cetera. If I start thinking about what's a process that I need to improve, what's a journey that I take a constituent on, or what's a process that my agency needs in order to deliver results like processing a claim, and I look at that from end to end and build my transformation around that, I actually get meaningful business outcomes, and I can set myself up to wrapper my existing legacy in a much more agile and automated process.
And then Harry, take us home here. when we talk about the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, if we have this conversation again a year from now, 3 years from now, where will you be on the IT modernization journey, and where will automation you expect to play a role? Like, look forward a little bit.
I think, Jason, we had a conversation a couple of years ago, I think, or 3 years
It's
ago.
been a while. You got to come back on my show.
Yeah, exactly. And then we talked about data analytics. So that's there at BEP now. So user community is engaged and embraces data quality and data analysis. So where I see us heading is more on not the artificial intelligence, but more on predictive analytics. How do we really, again, we're going to continue to use data to make better decisions, but to really focus on prediction and usage of data. So not on sort of the I think we are out of the reactory mode of the data. And on the modernization side, infrastructure side, continue to leverage cloud. To OMB's federal cloud strategy, there was a recent update. I think that was a major update in the last 7 years. So we're going to continue to embrace cloud and move into that direction.
All right, excellent. First of all, let me thank both my guests, because this is all the time we have for today. Harry Singh is the Chief Information Officer at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing at the Treasury Department. Harry, thank you so much for your time. And Don Sherman is the Chief Technology Officer and Vice President of Product Marketing at Pega. Don, thank you for your time.
Thanks.
You've been listening to the Journey to Technology Modernization in Government, sponsored by Pega Systems on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. I've been your host, Jason Miller. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Pega.
On behalf of Pega, I'd like to thank you for joining us. A link to the archive of the session will be sent to you shortly. If you requested a training certificate, you will also receive an email with download instructions after the webinar. This concludes our discussion. Thank you.